taking your courses, what do they learn?
So whenever I bring up this topic of ask, people say, well, is it as simple as just ask people what they want and give it to them? And the answer is not exactly. See, the process of asking questions is a bit counterintuitive. You can't just ask someone, what should I sell? How much should I charge it for? And then deliver it, because people don't know what they want. In fact, you've probably heard the quote from Henry Ford. He's famous for saying, if I'd asked people what they wanted, they would have told me faster horses. Steve Jobs is famous for saying, people don't know what they want until you show it to them. And the reason why those statements ring true is because they are true. People don't know what they want, but they do know a few things. They do know, for example, what they don't want. In fact, if I were to ask you, what's your dream car? What do you want in your dream car? You're going to access a part of your brain that's speculating. You're going to guess. But if I were to ask you, think about the car you're driving right now. What's one thing about your car right now that kind of bugs you a little bit, that's annoying, that frustrates you? Most of us can pick out what that thing is. And it gives us a clue on the types of questions that you want to ask to understand your market, to understand your audience at a deep emotional level. And the ask method is all about the nuance of asking the right questions in the right way to the right people to understand your audience and who they are. So you can not only better sell, but more importantly, better serve. And that's what the ask method is all about.
I remember when that book came out, I probably had a dozen friends recommend it to me. It was a really useful book for entrepreneurs, but now you have written what appears to be a prequel to that book. So what's a new book, and why was that needed?
So when you write a book like Ask, one of the great things that happens is you get a bunch of letters, emails, messages from people who tell you how much the book has changed their life. But you also get messages from people who say, I read the book and it didn't work. I tried what you teach and it didn't work for me. And when I got letters like that, it frustrated me. It pained me because I put my blood, sweat, and tears, my heart and soul into that book. And as many entrepreneurs as this worked for, there were people that used the methodology and didn't have success. And so I wanted to get to the bottom of that. And it kicked off what became the biggest research project of my life. And I started looking at what were the reasons why people were failing? What mistakes were they making? Where did I go wrong? Did I leave something out? And what I found is it all came down to one thing. People were choosing bad markets. And there's a metaphor that I use in my teaching, and it's like this. When you start a business, it's like deciding to throw your raft in a river. Now, you're building your business because you want to take yourself to some destination, whether it's achieving financial freedom, making an impact, leaving a legacy, changing your life and the life of your customers. And so that river is the thing that's going to get you to that destination. Now, you can have the best boat money can buy. You can hire the best crew. You can buy the best equipment. You can row 18 hours a day. But if that boat is facing the wrong direction, or worse yet, you throw that boat into a river that doesn't have any water in it, or a river that's going to swallow you up whole because it's just too big, you're never going to get to your destination. And that's what I found, is that people were choosing bad rivers. And so I asked myself, I said, what if I could teach people how to find that hidden river? The river that was just right. The river that's going to take you to exactly where you want to go. And so I embarked on this research project, and I looked at each of the 23 markets that we went into. I studied every single one of my clients and students and looked at what were the factors that separated the businesses and markets that were successful compared to the ones that failed. Now, I'm a huge fan. I was inspired by the work of Jim Collins, who's written Built to Last, Good to Great, Great by Choice. Now, Jim Collins' work centers around studying the most iconic companies in the world and what separates those that have been successful for decades from those that failed along the way. And I wanted to do the same thing for our small niche businesses. What was it that separated them? And what we found was that there were 7 factors. 7 factors that when you get these things right, you're setting yourself up for success. Every single one of our most successful businesses checked off these 7 boxes. The ones that failed were missing one of these key ingredients. And that is the subject of this book, Choose.
Okay, so obviously I have to know, what are the 7 factors?
So when it comes to choosing the right market and starting the right business, there are 7 factors. And I'll talk about a few of them right now. So one of the things that we discovered is that every single one of the most successful markets have what we call the 5 market must-haves. These are 5 factors that if you want to be successful, you want to make sure your market has. And I'll go through them. The first is what we call an evergreen market. Now, an evergreen market is in contrast with a fad market. Evergreen market is a market that was relevant 10 years ago, and it's a market that'll be relevant 10 years from now. Recent examples of fad markets, in my experience, I share the story of my Scrabble tile jewelry business. That's how I learned that lesson the first time. But a lot of people have experienced this recently. So fidget spinners is a perfect example of a fad market. It took over the world and then disappeared off a cliff. Another one that a lot of people have been affected by is the Bitcoin market. Now, there was a time recently where you could not turn a corner without everybody talking about Bitcoin and building businesses around Bitcoin, membership sites and online programs and exchanges. And you saw the price of Bitcoin skyrocket and then fall off a cliff. Now, one of the things that you can do is you can use a tool called Google Trends. Now, Google Trends is a tool that Google puts out to analyze the keyword volume of keywords. So how many people are online searching for information on Bitcoin or fidget spinners? And you can see the global trends. Is it going up? Is it cyclical? Is it going down? Or is it stable? Now, I learned the hard way what happens when you go into a fad market. They go up, but then they fall off a cliff. And so some of the markets that are evergreen markets, markets that have been here they're here to stay, are markets like orchid care, markets like leadership skills. You're looking for things that are going to be relevant, that are going to fuel your soul and fill your bank account for years and years and years to come. Not something that's going to be here today and gone tomorrow. So that's the first thing. But being in an evergreen market, turns out, is not enough. You also want a market that is an enthusiast market. Now, what that means is, in contrast with a problem-solution market, you want a market where people are consumers in that same space for years and years. So an example of a problem-solution market would be something like the flood removal market. Like if you have a flooded basement, you call up a company, they help you get rid of that flooding damage, and then you move on. There are no clubs, there are no Facebook groups, there are no newsletters to subscribe to stay in that world. In a problem-solution business, you constantly have to chase after a new customer. Versus an enthusiast market, you can acquire a customer once and sell to that same customer over and over again. So an example of an enthusiast market would be something like guitar. Someone learns how to play guitar, they want to be in that market for years. They're buying music, they're buying instruments, they're buying equipment. Dogs is another great market. So if you serve dog owners, you get someone who brings a puppy into their home, and then they buy all the things you know what it's like when you buy, if you've got a dog and know anybody who has a dog, you've got doggy bowls, doggy treats, doggy crates, doggy clothes, doggy Christmas ornaments. I mean, people spend crazy amounts of money on their pets. The market serving entrepreneurs is another great example. People who are entrepreneurs tend to be entrepreneurs for years and years and years. So those are examples of enthusiast markets. But it's not enough to be in an evergreen and an enthusiast market. You have to solve market must-have number 3, which is an urgent problem in the context of that evergreen and enthusiast market. What do I mean by that? Well, if you go into the doggy market, for example, you can't go into that market and expect to have a ton of success if you're going to sell something like doggy mugs, right? Nobody wakes up in the middle of the night and says, honey, we got to get this doggy mug tonight, tomorrow. What you're looking for is what we call a $10,000 problem, a burning problem that people need to solve right here, right now. An example in the dog market would be a dog peeing on the rug. You bring a new puppy home and the dog pees on the rug, pees on the sofa, pees on the clothing, pees on the bed. It reaches a boiling point where you say, enough is enough. We've got to solve this thing now. A story I share in the book is Dana Obelman and her husband. They help parents with young kids get their kids to sleep through the night. That's a perfect example. If you've ever had young kids at home, you know what it's like when you're trying to get some sleep and nobody's getting any sleep in the house. That's a problem. That's a $10,000 problem. So that's market must-have number 3. Number 4 is a market that has what we call future problems. Now, when you solve that first $10,000 problem for someone, you have this opportunity to become their trusted advisor for life. If you help someone, if you're the dog whisperer, and you help someone get their dog to become potty trained, the only question they have is, hey, my dog's barking. How do I get her to stop barking? Or my dog's pulling on the leash. How do I help her with this thing? What you're looking for is a market where when you help someone become successful in that first thing that you help them with, that success leads to a new problem. So in the entrepreneurship market, we'll take that for example. Once you choose your market and decide what business to start, the next question that you might be asking is, well, how do I figure out what to sell? Then once you have success selling that product, you might be saying, I'm doing all the work myself. How do I hire my first employee to get some help? So every level of success leads to a future problem that you have the opportunity to solve. So that's number 4. Number 5 is what we call PWMs. So I first learned this phrase from the late, great Gary Halbert, who's largely regarded as one of the greatest direct response copywriters of all time. Now, PWM stands for Players with Money. You want to find a market where you have people who spend a disproportionate amount of their income in that area of their life. Now, it's not to say you're selling to billionaires or millionaires, but you're looking for an area that people spend a disproportionate amount of their money in that area. So for example, golf is a classic example. If you know anybody who plays golf, they spend crazy amounts of money on golf equipment, golf instruction, golf trips, vacations, and so forth. Wine is another great example. People who are fans of wine will spend a ton of money in that area of their life. Dogs, another great example. If you have a dog, I mean, gosh, our little 4.5-pound Chihuahua, the amount of money we spend pound for pound on that little girl is incredible. And so you're looking for something like that. You're looking for evidence of PWMs. So, evergreen market, enthusiast market, urgent problem, future problems, and PWMs.